Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. No racing in Belgium this weekend. In fact, no racing on the TV even in terms of cyclocross action. But that doesn't stop us. We are going to be discussing some news from the cyclocross world, and with me here today is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Issam. Perhaps a bit of a weird season start this year, don't you think? Molenbeek, then an empty week, some riders switching back to the gravel world championships. For instance, Laurens Sweekel's racing there. Toon Aerts, of course, hasn't started his cyclocross season yet because of that, but it gives a weird dynamic to it. But at the same time, we can see that some riders are very eager to race, one of them being Michael van Toerenhout. He was supposed to race in Switzerland a week before Molenbeek as well, but he got sick. Now he returned, he raced in Steinmaur and kind of obligatory took the win ahead of Kevin Kuhn and Jente Michels. I think we would be disappointed in Van Toerenhout if he didn't take that win.
He did what he had to do, and I think if you go off from what we have seen in Molenbeek and normally his name as well, it's within the expectations, and he needs to deliver in these type of races with the competition that he had, and he did. So I think we can conclude in that regard for Van Toerenhout that that Molenbeek was not a coincidence, that his form is good and that he is so far delivering, I guess. And these are the smaller races, and we have to see how that will translate into the entirety of the season. But I think he can be satisfied with the win in Steinmauer.
His form early on seems a bit better than last year. Last year, of course, he was good in Beringen, but after that seemed to be in a little bit of a slop. Really, it took until Jurgen Mettepenningen started putting some pressure on in the start of the World Cup period in the middle of November. That's roughly when Van Toerenhout kicked into motion last year, but this year he seems good. I mean, we would expect him to win there, but he still needs to do it. It was a relatively fast course there. The conditions were bone dry. Kuhn, I saw that he crashed while in the lead and then needed to fight back. He was not in the leading group of 4 halfway through the race, but he managed to fight back. Second place, I think, is impressive, and perhaps that means that Kevin Kuhn will move up in the power rankings. Issam's Mud Mountain, which is going to be coming in the midweek episode this week, but I'll leave that entirely up to you, Issam. I would like to make one more point here. So, Gerben Kuiper's 4th place is an improvement from where we saw him in the results in Molenbeek. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Jente Michels, 3rd place for him. He was also racing last weekend. He was in Molenbeek just outside of the top 10, 11th. He was fighting for the lead in Brumath, but crashed and then fell further back there as well. What are your expectations for Michels, who is now a first-year elite this season?
It is going to be a big season for Michels in terms of, I think that he has to deliver somewhat on this. We had expectations. We thought that the potential was there. He has shown it. It was a bit in the shadow of Del Grosso last year, and he had his moments which were not good during the races as well. He has the tendency to crash at times and important moments, and I think that for this season he definitely has to show that he has what it takes to fight for in top 5 and podiums in races. And I think when the race is going to suit him, he's going to be more upfront. When there is more climbing to it, I think that suits him well. His opening season, with Molenbeek and Brumath were somewhat underwhelming, I have to say, and we have to see. I mean, I think this result now in Steinmauer is definitely something that is to take with you and be see what that will bring. Is that going to be something that we can see from Michels more often in the season? And how will he be in the season? Will he be able to be consistent in the season, which he was able to do somewhat last season as well, but he also had his moments where he struggled, and it's not a terrible thing to happen, but I think that needs to be less the case this season.
I think last year he already showed quite a high degree of maybe not necessarily consistency, but his Overall base level in terms of performance was quite okay, but if you talk about like having a floor and a ceiling in terms of performances, what Michels needs to work on is that floor, Issam, because if you take a look at Lucinda Brandt, her floor is like incredibly high. Last year it was every race on the podium. That's insane. But what you want to have is this comfortable range of performances and this floor which you don't like really crack through. You don't want to have like those days where you finish 26th or 30th or maybe even 40th. You don't want to have your off days be that bad. And last year I feel that Michel still had a few too many of those days in which the performances just really didn't add up. I remember in Antwerp he was absolutely nowhere to be seen. In Besançon, the U23 World Cup, it was also a phenomenal off day for him. The Belgian Championships were also another day like that. So I think that's what he needs to work on, perhaps more than the overall consistency, because if you purely look at the face value of his results, Issam, they were quite good. Like in the elite races, I remember maybe 7th place in Namur, somewhere around that. Don't pin me down on that, please. But in Baal, I remember seeing him race and also being way up there in the race. Like he had quite a lot of performances that indicated, hey, I'm a really talented rider. I'm ready to make that step to the elite.
I definitely agree with that. I think that he has shown last season as well that the potential's there for him to be a class rider. I think that what you pointed out in terms of his sort of floor, that is definitely something when it doesn't really go his way in the racing, he doesn't have the legs or some mishaps. He struggles to find the rhythm and get back into a race and fight for a good position. And that is, with the elites, the chances of things going and not really going your way or not having the best legs compared to your competitors, that is something that you have to take in consideration and will happen several races at least. And that is, he will learn. I definitely think that is what this season will be all about learning, trying to learn and be better and get better. And that is how he's going to have to try and get through this season. And for him, I guess it would be great if he has in this learning curve of the season, if he has these moments, televised races in which he can be on the podium and can be winning as well. And I think that would be very helpful in his sort of learning curve going into this season.
The women's race then in Steinmaur, Julie Brouwers took the win in a very close finish. It was very nipped, just 1 second. It came down to a sprint between her and Rebecca Esteban. Third place there went to Electra Galezo. Men junior races, just very briefly glancing through there, because in the women elite race the field really wasn't that deep, not that much to say about it unfortunately, but we'll come to a bit more women's action in a bit. So men junior, we see Søren-Brière-Jumar, of course the runner-up at last year's World Championships, getting into the racing relatively early this year, racking up the victories for now as well. And we see no rest for Anja Grossman in the women junior category, immediately taking the win. I contemplated making a very early warning comment here, because she came directly from mountain bike worlds, road worlds, then road European championships, and now cross. That's a lot of stacking up. But then I remembered last year she kind of did a similar thing, raced until the European championships, then took a longer break and only rebuilt for the world championships. So we'll see where that leads for her. She will be one of the favorites as well, after standing on the podium of the junior mountain bike and road world championships. But a level above in the elite category, Issam, if we move across to Italy, Sara Casasola has started her season at home, taking 2 wins last week in Treviso. It was a very muddy race. She took the win. Now on a much faster course in Osopo this week, she again took the win. It would kind of be what we expect from her. If she wouldn't be winning, we would be raising some concerns like, hey, this isn't that good of a sign coming into this season, but now we're just waiting for her to come across to Belgium so we can really see where she stands against the rest.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's in a way also smart because of how this season has been starting. That you had this week in between. I don't think you will. This way you can actually also just prepare somewhat in a smaller environment where it is all just a little bit more easygoing. The races, you are just able to pick your position a bit better, and you know from next week onwards the races will all get there, and the calendar will be stacked, and then you can obviously try to move, get through the races and see where it goes. But for now it's just this opening couple of weekends. There is not really, it's all about the feeling, it's all about trying to get better, trying to know where your level is at the moment, and see if the preparation of the summer has worked, and if it doesn't, where there is where there are things that you have to work on. And I think I don't think that it's a terrible thing to do these races in Italy right now. It's actually, I guess, even somewhat of a smart thing to do.
I agree, and it's so important for the local racing scene as well, right? Like, it's such a great opportunity to see like the best riders of your country race at home. And while for the rider development it's often best to spend more time in Belgium, it's also cool that younger riders have the opportunity to see a rider like Casasola in action. I mean, Casasola is one of the world's best riders. But an overarching comment I have on the Italian scene is, we've been talking, I think, for 3-ish years now. Okay, the Italians, they're really pushing through. There's a lot of talent coming through. And on the women's side, you can kind of see it to an extent that it's getting a bit more body at the top. With 15 riders, the field here in Osopo wasn't that deep, but you have Casasola, who's one of the world's best riders. But I was quite impressed. Second place went to Elisa Ferri. She was a rider last year who we've seen on the bubble of the Junior World Cups quite a lot. We have Carlotta Borello, a rider who we've mentioned a number of times. She was mostly winning these races when Casasola was in Belgium. We have Rebecca Garibaldi in 5th place. She finished in the top 10 last year of some races during the Christmas period. I recall Mol. Of course, those races didn't have the most stacked field, but it's getting a bit more body at the top. And the talent is continuing to come through. You have Giorgia Pellizzotti, the daughter, as we've said last year already, of Franco Pellizzotti. She won 2 races already this year. Last year, we saw her finish in the top 10 of the World Championships. This is a talented young rider coming up again. And that's on the women's side. But on the men's side, I think we have some reason to talk in similarly optimistic terms. I guess the question overarching for me is, where is it going? And I would like to have your thoughts on that in a bit. But Stefano Viezzi, he's on Alpecin. Sara Casasola is on Crelan. It seems like for the Italians there's a pathway to the Belgian teams, the biggest teams. But where is it overall going? Like, Viezzi won last weekend, now 6th place. He needs to improve and start consistently winning these races. But then there's Agostinacchio, DNF here, but he's on EF. Grigolini will be one of the favorites for the men junior world title this year. Same for Pezzo Rosola. We've seen the Italians for years push through now. And I already see, like, in the results here, a bunch of first years eager to step in as well. So it appears that there's quite a large pool of talent. But there's not one pathway forward. Like, some go on to the Belgium team, some go on to the road team, some stay with the Foch Airport team, the Guerciotti team. I'm curious to see, like, what direction you're going. I think you would share my optimism and positivity, but then what is kind of what I'm trying to piece out.
I cannot really tell you then what, but I think that the observation is correct. I think that Italy so far, the last couple of years, the growth on all, in all categories, to be honest, has been significant. It is visible. On the women's side, it's definitely, as you're saying, it's there are some riders at the top, or at least they are trying to form sort of a top for the at least on the regional level. And Casasola seems to have been breaking that the barrier, and is in good hands with Crelan, in my opinion, and has the ability and the possibility, I guess, to be able to race for top 5s, podiums, and even potential wins. And I think that on the men's side, and also on the women's side, I think that the FAS Airport Giuseppe team has played a role in this, and I think that the way they have been able to assist riders and help them in their development as well in terms of picking up young talent, I think that plays a role, and you need that in a as a country, I guess, to have sort of at least somewhere to go and something a little bit central, because if you look at the Italian teams, they are the team. There's not really much else. There are other teams, but they're very small, I guess. And I think that is somewhat part of the success, and that is part of why it is going the way it is going. And I think that they also, in the federation itself, with Pontoni there, they want to make something happen. They have ideas, they have plans. There is a trajectory. They want to grow, and I think it's the steps are there and the progressions are made. The only thing that I somewhat questioning, I guess, is, those talents, are they actually going to be able to stick around in cyclocross, or is cyclocross maybe just the sort of the first step towards then eventually going to mountain bike or going to road racing? And that is, I guess, somewhat had been a problem in the past and could potentially again be a problem in the future. I mean, we have seen now with the Roodhoofs, because they have some Italian interest, that they are willing to go for it. But apart from them, there's not really any other big cyclocross team or a cyclocross team overall that is willing to take that opportunity. So what does that say, and what does that mean going forward? It is going to be a tricky situation, and I hope that they will that it will be continuing, and that they will be able to bring the talents to the top of cyclocross, because I think that if that would happen, it would help in terms of development. It would help with the internationalization of the sport. So yeah, I think that if that would be the case, and Italy actually gets bigger and bigger in cyclocross, I think it will only have benefits, in my opinion. And there are some hurdles that have to be taken yet, and we have to wait and see how those hurdles will be taken, and if that will be in the benefit of the sport, and for Italy as well in their involvement within cyclocross.
That's the overarching thing, like, for all countries, like, what happens, can they stay in the sport? And I would argue in Italy, it appears at the moment with France to be like more robust. It appears to be a stronger foundation to build upon, because they have that pathway through the Italian sponsors in the Roodhoof brothers. But I guess you can also see it as a strength, right? There's not just one pathway. We're talking here that there are other pathways, and you can see that Agostinacchio is of such a level that EF is investing in a cross program for him, including his brother. So you can see that there's some fundamental changes there, and that there's multiple ways forward. There's the FAS Airport Services Guerciotti team, you have Belgian pathway, you have road pathways. And of course, the risk is Agostinacchio discovers himself on the road and then moves towards a road-based career. But with Vietzi, I think it's clear that they have a full-time cyclocross rider. So I think I would see it as a strength and be cautiously optimistic. But of course, in an ideal scenario, there's a new commercial partner that steps in for the FAS Airport Services, facelifts their budget, makes sure that they can pick up these riders like Gregolini and Petzorosa and keep them in racing through their U23 years in cross. But for now, I would still kind of bolster that optimistic feeling about Italian cyclocross, because I do think it's really, really growing. And as you said, Pontoni is doing some good things through that program. I think we should briefly run over some of the other results. The Spanish cyclocross season has started. It actually started last week in Gijón, with Kevin Suarez Fernandez taking the win and Lucia González Blanco. The second round of the Spanish cyclocross trophy, the Copa de España, took place in Xanxac, which was this weekend. Lucia González Blanco keeps her winning streak alive on the women's side, ahead of Sofia Rodriguez Rever and Alicia González Blanco taking third. On the men's side, González Iguacho Macho took the win ahead of Raúl Bonastre, with Mario San Milan rounding out the podium. The Czech season also got underway. Last week we covered the first round of the HFS System Cup. And in addition to that, there is normally as kind of extension the Slovakian scene, not every week, but last year a lot of riders headed from the Czech Republic to Slovakia. Zemanova took the win ahead of Duderova and Musgrave on the women's side, Jezek ahead of Kerol and Ulik on the men's side. But this weekend there was racing in the Czech Republic and Slovakia on the same day. I mean, the countries neighbor each other but aren't exactly close together. It can be quite a distance. I'll start with the results in the Czech Republic. It was Victor van der Putte taking the win ahead of Hannes Degenkolb and Michal Boros in Pilsen, a venue we of course remember from the World Cup back in the day. The course now is not remotely close. I think the city is the same, but the venue has changed as well. Women's side, Zemanova taking the win of Katerina Hladikova and Eliska Dubralova. So I think maybe in last week's episode, we kind of ignored Victor van der Putte a bit while he had a really great performance, and we should definitely mention it now. He takes the win there, adds a bit of points to his tally, but last week, top 10 in Möllebeke was a promising start to the season for him.
Yeah, I think that when you start the season, or as a watcher, I'm talking as a watcher, you sometimes have this feeling of, wait, who is that? I think with Van der Putte, for me at least, that I had that feeling somewhat, and I think that it is mainly a little bit because he was a promising talent, and he still is, but he kind of somewhat went under the radar because of his performances. He was always like it's a bit harsh to say mid-tier talent, but he was there or thereabout, but he was never really getting through with his results, and I think that it is the opening of the start of his season has been remarkable. It has been quite good, and he has been up there. He's making step, it seems, and this summer has been doing good for him. And the question is again, when somewhat don't want to repeat myself what we have said in the latest episode in terms of it's just the start of the season and we don't know where it will end up, but I think it is promising for him the way he has been starting. He has been mixing it up. He's up there, and I think that they have with Hensgracht, they have a very good rider there within them, and actually a very solid talent. And that we have to wait and see what it will mean, the results of now, if that will if we will see that in the later stages of the season and when it's going to matter a little bit more with the World Cups. But for now, I think it's quite promising, and it's for Van der Putte definitely something to work with and try to improve on and see if it can even get better in the next couple of races.
For me, definitely not a case of who is this, but that's mainly because I interviewed him just before the season started. He's been racing for the Lotto development team on the road this year, and in that interview, which we published on our Substack, he spoke about the new, more professional environment he can tap into through the road, that he has nutritionists, that he has an extra coach working with him, he has access to mental coaching, and he hoped that would make a step for him. He said very specifically, last year I was always finishing around 11th, 12th. I seem to have a subscription on the 13th place. And he said, I hope this adds a bit to my power and my performance. So the upcoming season, I will constantly be around 8th, 9th place. So I'm on that results sheet, putting my name forward. And that's, of course, how it works. Because if you watch and you look, of course, we'll spit through the results a bit. But normally even we name the top 10 of the races and have a few talking points about that. So it definitely makes sense that was his goal, and so far it seems to be going well. But again, early days, but still a good reason for him to be optimistic. Then, to continue my point, because we also had the results in Slovakia, there was a race in Celeste with Barnabas Vast taking the win ahead of Matej Ulik and Jakob Riemann. The women elite race, Antonia Bialek taking the win ahead of Susanna Kristalla and Teresa Kurnika. There was racing in Sweden. This year the start lists there were not as deep as we've seen them. The wins went to Clément Horny on the men's side and Alicia Frank on the women's side. Frank is not staying for the next Swedish races that are taking place next week. She is racing in Ardøye, midweek race this Thursday. So it's always interesting to see who stays around, who makes what choices for the points. And then finally, this weekend at least, there's still a second day of racing here. The Englewood Open in Fall River, racing on a farm. Nathan Nowless took the win in the men's category ahead of Calvin Conway and Jack Bernard. Women elite race, Manon Bakker still taking a few extra points ahead of Anna McGill and Lily Sonneman. Last weekend, I would still want to give you the results from the overall of the USCX series. We mentioned it that it was a winner-takes-all scenario for the Trek USCX over on the men's side. Eventually, Strohmeyer won on the final day and took the win. Rochette won all but one of the races on the women's side and therefore also clinched the overall. In Brumath, Jordi Corses took the win with Leonie Bentveld. I think the only thing I have to say on Bentveld is that I passed her while she was training yesterday. That's the only useless fact that you'll get from me, because let's move to more serious business than my own training rides through Belgium. Issam, yesterday also the Gravel World Championships for Women. It took place in the south of the Netherlands. Very curious situation at the end of the race. Shirin van Anrooij was solo. Behind there was a group of 4 riders, including 3 Dutch riders, Jara Kastelein, Lorena Wiebes and Marianne Vos. They were, well, you would expect them in normal situations to just concede, right? There's a countrywoman up the road and we'll have that just play out. Van Anrooij takes the win and will sprint for the second place. Very good opportunity to look out the podium against Sylvia Persico. But they didn't do that. Kastelein for some reason decided to pace. Wiebes said, oh yeah, it makes sense. Everybody rides for themselves. And then Wiebes became title. That was a very weird situation. I don't think we need to go into much of the tactics there, but above all, Van Anrooij, she's returning to cross. Van Isa said it. It's not been easy for her. She missed the cross season last year entirely. The road season this year was very difficult. She was very emotional in the interview after the race, not only because her teammates had kind of backstabbed her, but also because she said, all season I've been chasing, I've not felt great, now I finally felt good, and then this happens, and I'm here thinking, well, what can we expect from her in cross?
Well, I think that the emotions were understandable, but to try and answer that question, I think it is, currently very hard for us to judge and say what we can expect because we have almost no reference. It is on the women's side, if all the riders that normally should be there are there, it is, there is a strong field. We have seen it last year as well. It was even for Van Empel at times, not all the time, but there were moments that it was difficult and there were challenges. And I think that on the women's side, the competitors, in terms of the level, it has been, there are more riders now that are capable of riding a top 5 and that are going to be up there. And then if you are going to try and look for Van Anrooij and see where she will end up, it is somewhat hard to say. And I think we can really judge it with the first few races. But I think that it is possible for her if she is in good form and everything goes well, and the feeling, the feeling on the cross bike is also there, and it is all working out a little bit and it goes somewhat her way. I think that she could potentially be able to race on a good day with a few riders missing a top 5. I think it is possible, but it depends on many factors, and it depends on on the form, on the feeling on the bike, on the handling itself as well, and the power that is able to be to be outed. I think those are all significant factors, but I think that Van Anrooij has the potential to do that, but we have to see. And that is somewhat my assessment of what I think Van Anrooij could do. But I think I said that a couple episodes before that I think the most important thing for her is just have fun. It is somewhat cliche, but I think that is probably the most important thing. And try to enjoy the racing, and try to have a good feeling, and that is probably where she should be looking at in the beginning, and not really have the expectations at all. Just go try to race and have fun. And I think when you have that, then it's also then you are probably more able to do more races, because if you have expectations to finish in the top 5 or the top 10 or the best 15 or even win, it's gonna be difficult if you are then starting the first couple of races and you're 15th, 16th, 18th, 23rd, I don't know, but if that is going to be the case, then how are you going to motivate yourself? So I hope that the expectations are not going to be that high for her. I don't think they will be. And it's just all about having fun, I guess, for Van Anrooij this cross campaign. And if the results are coming in, then for sure you should, try and take it, I wouldn't say more seriously, but try to set higher goals and try to see what is all possible.
I think she will really struggle. It's all very valid points you make, but maybe I'm still kind of stuck in that image from 2 years ago. That race in Boom, the race in Flamanville, it just all seemed so tough, so slow, so rusty, and now missing a full season is super difficult to come back from. So I'm a little bit worried about the way she will come in. I think she has intrinsically, like, deep inside her, like, there is the talent. That's, I think, undisputed. Her sand riding skills were always quite good. Her running skills through her background there are also very renowned. So that's there. I want to have acknowledged that. But coming back from this won't be easy. And, I mean, I do the Noah's 9 ranking, and I'm just thinking, when everyone is there, would she make my top 9? And, like, coming in, I would be cautious, because you have Brandt, Alvarado, Van Empel, Pietersen. Then you get the next tier with, like, Schreiber, Vash, Backstedt, Van der Heijden. Like, the names add up quite quickly, and before you know it, you're already at 8 riders. So it will be tough, and I do agree, like, top 5 should be doable, but, like, for the way they're talking about it, like, oh yeah, this is a rider who will immediately come back and contend World Cup wins, podium contender at the World Championships. I'm thinking, like, well, I'm not so sure about that. I think that won't be as easy as you would think it to be. So, top 10 certainly, but really that push to that level where we've seen her before, I think that might be harder than some people expect. So, that remains to be determined. She will start her season around the World Cup period, is what Sven Nys said. So, we still have roughly, and it doesn't actually seem like that long anymore, Issam. It's a month and a week until the World Cup start. But before we reach that, we can use this last calm week before the season really gets underway to discuss a final point in this episode. I was in the Sportpaleis last Thursday, and it was my first time there. And it's kind of crazy to think that Sven Nys sold out that place for his retirement 2 evenings in a row. And it made me think, like, where is the state of Belgian cyclocross right now? Like, how do we compare? Like, in the Belgian media, they always talk about the times of Wellens and Nys and so many spectators. I mean, Sportpaleis seats 25,000, so that's 50,000 people coming to say farewell to Sven Nys. Where are we now? They say the times of Wellens and Nys never come back. I've said here that I agree with that, but that's not necessary, because we have the times of Van der Poel and Van Aert, and I think that's not more than healthy, and times change. More people tune in on the TV with modern technology. So what's your stance? Maybe you could start by kind of explaining, because maybe it's not that clear to everyone. What are the times of Wellens and Nys?
I think if you are just, if you tuned into cyclocross, let's say 5 years ago, it's almost unimaginable, I think, how those times were in terms of the crowd, the interest. Even if they had their seasons were not that great, I think Wellens had that more than Nys, I guess. Nys was able to be just a bit more consistent throughout his years, but the interest that was there, I mean, it was a happening. It was a real happening. And I can remember the broadcasts of that time in a way. I think like from, let's say, 2009-ish. I think maybe a little bit earlier, but it's, and even if you look back and you watch those races back of 2003, 2004, 2005, it was big. It was insane actually at times. And the interest was there. They had a huge fan base. It was there was a lot of drama, which I think helps a little bit in with that. You obviously had the whole Sint Michielsgestel thing. You had the Rabobank thing, the rivalry, Valens being a double world champion. I mean, go on and go on and go on. And I think just the memories that they have created for the fans were huge. And they were cyclocross. If you were talking about cyclocross, it was Valens, nice, on the men's side. And the women's side at that time didn't really have attention at all. You know, I can remember on the Belgian broadcast, it probably got 2 minutes, maybe even less. So times were different at that time, and they had all the attention to themselves. And it was crazy times. And if you're going to compare that to, for example, to what we have with Van der Poel and Van Aert, I think it is also big in a way, because we have seen it how it was in Hogerheide. We have, if Van Aert is going to show up in an exact cross, there is definitely going to be a difference in the tendency, and the spectators are going to be there very enthusiastic, probably knowing that Van Aert is going to win with not a big starting field, but it doesn't really matter. They just want to see their hero. And I think that was also at that time, it was nice, and Valens were heroes, TV shows and all that. So I think now, if you look at cyclocross and you look at the riders that are now at the top, excluding Van der Poel and Van Aert, I guess, it is not that big. And I think that maybe has to do a little bit with the fact that cyclocross at the moment is not a very, it's not at the same level as it was in those times. I wouldn't say the sport has shrunken a little bit, but I think attention went a little bit elsewhere. And so it is hard to say if I think that what you said about those times are never going back, I don't think those times will come back either. But I think it could come back in a sort of a new way, and it could be a little bit different. We see with Thibaut, he has a fan base, and the people are trying to get behind him. If his results get better, and if he is going to be able to bring special moments to the Belgian fans, I think then it could somewhat replicate in a different way what was the atmosphere and the hype at that time. And we have to wait and see. But I think to go back on that Sportpaleis and the fact that Nice sold that out, I think that's a little crazy. I mean, I think that is a level that is hard to achieve. I mean, I think that Van Aert and Van der Poel would be able to do that, but overall, I think that we probably have to wait for a couple more years till we'll find a cyclocross rider apart from those guys that will be able to do that. And it's in a way deserving, because Nice and his legacy, and also Valens in a way, quite a legacy that's very hard to replicate. We see with Van der Poel that he's able to somewhat do it, but they were special riders as well. So it's not only taking the whole timing and all that, but it's also the riders themselves. They had it in him though to take that time to that level.
I want to make a few connotations though, because I do think you did a really good job in explaining like why people are very, very like in Belgium. That's like a term, the times of Valens and Nice. Everybody knows you're just referring from 2000 until 2008, and Vervecke should be part of that. And you had these great duels between multiple riders at the front of the races with Groenendaal, and they were closely contested. But what I think really plays a role, Issam, is that this was the first generation of Belgian superstars. Like, you had the riders coming in from other countries in the beginning, but cross really moved to Belgium in that period, and they were pleased, like, oh, all of a sudden all these riders are here all of the time, they're on TV, the races are getting broadcasted. It was like a new thing. Wow, it had the wow factor, a buzz around it. And there were TV stars, as you say. There was a soap series about Valens for, I think, 3 seasons. They followed his normal life and his shithousery and shenanigans with his teammates. And there were other TV programs. I think it's time we get another TV series on cross. I mean, it's been a few years since DNA Nice is gone, so it's time we get something else. We had, of course, the one season of Kroonprins. I always used to watch that when I was much, much younger. So it's time for another one of that. But at the same time, I think people are nostalgic just because it's the first time the Belgians fully dominated. Like, for 20 years they didn't dominate, and now all of a sudden it was luxury. It was pick your world champion. It was a free for all, and you could do whatever you wanted if you were a Belgian. And at the same time, the nostalgia bias has also kind of eroded the perception of those times, because people act like every race there were 50,000 people lined up. And well, it's true that for the big races, like, things actually got out of hand in terms of spectators. I mean, like 65,000 people in Hogerheide for the 2009 World Championships, and fears of riots between the Dutch and Belgian fans, Team Boom versus Team Belgium. Like, it's kind of overstated just a little bit in the perception of people. And certainly the attendance early in the season was more because those riders raced all year long. But probably the perspective around cross and the reflection on that time has also changed a bit now that they see, like, okay, yeah, so if Van der Poel and Van Aert build this legacy and they have the time and a few years to build their following and build their performances, then people will start coming to see them as well. And now I think it's slowly people are realizing, okay, we had a really weird situation where the old guard of riders all retired, Wellens, Nys, Vervecke. The generation behind all had, like, reasons that they either didn't perform, they left to the road, or retired. Albert with his heart issues, Stibar and Boom that went towards the road, Rob Peters who never really pushed through. That was just a very weird moment for cross, and there was nobody who really had time to establish, but you're already seeing it now. You mentioned Nice. I think in the same breath we should mention Del Grosso. Like, these are the next entertainers. These are the next characters that are building their fan base already, and you can see it at the cross races, people with their hats and merchandise. Is cyclocross slightly less popular in Belgium now? Yes. Should they be worried somewhat about their riders moving towards the road more like in other countries? Also, yes, but at the same time, I think, just kind of to place it in context, you say, well, Van der Poel and Van Aert would sell out the Sportpaleis. They would. So, yeah, those are the stars, and the stars of back then would also do. Would Albert have sold out the Sportpaleis 2 evenings in a row? I'm not sure how liked Albert was in the grand scheme of things, and if he would have been able to do that. Wellens, for sure. Vervecke, also more of a quieter rider. It's the figures that do it. It's the personalities, Issam.
I think Albert would have done it. I think he would have. I mean, if we look at the attendance in Koksijde as well, which you could not all just point at Albert that he was the one, but Albert was going into that race as a rider that could, you know, potentially become world champion, and he had a fan base. His fan base was also quite impressive, I have to say, because he was the guy that was able to challenge Nice at times, and I think that is also, like, that underdog position that he was somewhat in kind of helped him as well, and gave him a lot of sympathy, despite the fact that, you know, he was also quite arrogant at times in his interviews, and that which helped also. And he was a personality, he was a character, Albert. So I think he potentially would have been able in his prime, and when the hype was there, he probably would have been able to do that. Now I don't think so. Now he's more a bit the grumpy guy that complains about everything. But anyways, let's not get too personal. But yeah, I think that I have to agree with most of the points, and the important part that you also kind of mentioned was Belgium was somewhat in ruins, with the foreigners, quote unquote, the foreigners winning the races and becoming world champion, and then was this sort of golden generation that was coming through and being led by Nice and being led by Wellens. And I think that just it all just came together and it worked out, and it's just a different time, and it's hard to compare, and it's hard to say that we have to get back to that time, because there were also, you know, in terms of internationally, the riders that were trying to get up there, it was not insane. So there were also some parts of it that, you know, you would look at and be like, that could be better. But overall, I think it's definitely the sport at that time was just a huge hype in Belgium, and right now there is a hype, but it's just for different reasons, and the world just works a little bit different right now.
I think that's a good way to finish up this episode, a good conclusion. Issam, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me.
And we will be back this week with a episode which will be for everyone. We'll be doing our power rankings, Noah's 9 and Issam's Mud Mountain. And then in the near future, we'll also be making a subscriber-only Q&A episode. So if you have any questions for that, please feel free to send them in through our Substack. You can send us a direct message there or comment on one of our posts. Thanks for listening and goodbye.